Can you hear me?
I can, but quiet for the moment, please.
The broadcast of the regular meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation will now begin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this live broadcast of our virtual meeting. Meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under local health pandemic rules, state statute section 13D.021. For the record, my name is Carol Becker, and I am the president of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. I will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so we may verify the presence of a quorum.
Board Member Fry.
Here.
Cogill.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here.
Bender.
Here.
Fletcher.
Here.
President Becker.
Here.
There are 6 members present.
Let the record reflect we have a quorum. We will now proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access at the city's Legislative Information Management System, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. For all voting, roll call procedures will be required. So I need the adoption of the agenda. Board members, the agenda is before us today. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
We have a proper motion before us. Is there a discussion before the clerk calls the roll? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll with that motion on the motion.
Board Member Fry.
Aye.
Cogill.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
President Becker.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
Next on the agenda is the acceptance of minutes from the October 14th meeting. I have a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a proper motion before us. Clerk, could you call the roll?
Board Member Fry.
Aye.
Cogill.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
President Becker.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
All right. That motion passes. The minutes are accepted as presented. Item 4 on the agenda is a presentation or just a discussion from the Executive Committee of the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee, or CLIC. Do I have the members of CLIC here?
This is John Bernstein. I'm here.
Willie Bridges, I'm here.
Is there anybody else from here from CLIC? Was everyone able to get in? I don't see Jeff Strand or Eric Wan. Does anyone know if they're still trying to get in or if there have been connectivity issues?
They're planning to be here.
Yeah.
I had difficulty. This is John Bernstein. I had difficulty getting on to this call, so they may be experiencing the same.
Okay, it looks like
Madam
Jeff
President?
Strand. Yes.
Yes, Mr. Strand has just joined the meeting, I believe, and I will check with the tech team though.
Okay, thank you.
President
Mr. Strand,
Becker,
are you?
Jeff Strand, I am present.
Thank you. Well, we are right at your agenda item, and I was wondering if I could turn it over to you and your board members to give us an overview of the CLIC report this year and sort of the issues that you're seeing on the capital side with the city.
Yes, President. Thank you, President Becker and Vice President Wheeler and the Board
The
of...
clerk's office reminded everyone, please turn your camera on for the broadcast and then make sure that you're unmuted when you're speaking. And Mr. Strand, you were there and then you disappeared. There you are.
I'm there again?
We cannot
Thank
hear you, Mr. Strand.
I am not muted.
Still cannot hear you.
That might be on your side.
Tech team help us out.
Becker,
Yeah,
I can hear.
I can hear him.
Oh,
I can hear him.
can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
Says
Yeah, very
that
good.
Jackie says that we can hear Mr. Strand. Okay.
Okay, terribly sorry for any technical issues. Thank you, President Becker. I just have a short statement. Thank you, President Becker, Vice President Wheeler, and Board of Estimate and Taxation members for this opportunity to visit with elected officials serving on the city board. I'm accompanied today virtually by several other members of the CLIC Executive Committee. I believe Willie Bridges, Vice Chair, Task Force Chair John Bernstein, I heard, and I believe Task Force Vice Chair Eric Wan. So I wish to note the request to speak with the BET was vetted with the CLIC Executive Committee and affirmed by 5 of 6 members who responded. CLIC recognizes that it's primarily serves residents of Minneapolis through their elected officials of mayor and city council. That is clear in the CLIC bylaws and mission. We, the members of the CLIC Executive Committee, in no way wish to get sideways with any of our elected officials who are our appointing authorities. Yet we also believe in the value of transparency and information sharing, is my view. So the CLIC report produced in 2020 October and available online contains this is the CLIC report, contains the 6-year capital improvement program recommendations along with the capital budget recommendations for funding for 2021. This report is the primary work product delivered by the committee. The CLIC committee consists of 33 members, 7 appointed by the mayor and then 2 per ward for the 13 council members. So this year was fraught with challenges related to the COVID-19 local state of emergency. All meetings were virtual using Microsoft Teams with its limitations, and there were no in-person large group presentations. There were Q&A virtual sessions with city and board staff to answer questions. There was a virtual robust discussion with the Minneapolis Planning Commissioners. The report recommendations, the cover letter, comments, and ratings speak for itself. So I wish to note that CLIC members here are attending to represent ourselves as members of the CLIC Executive Committee. Since we did not have an opportunity to go back to the full body for direction to attend, the opinions shared are our own unless we are citing specific elements from the adopted 2020 CLIC report. So may I say, just as a launching point, that I've served on CLIC appointed by 3 different Ward 4 council members, the late Alice Rainville, Barbara Johnson, and Philippe Cunningham, and have served Mayor Sales Belton, Ryback, Hodges, and Fry. We are all unpaid volunteers, your constituents, voters, taxpayers, and ratepayers like yourselves and our valued neighbors. When I was first appointed to CLIC in 1997-98, the committee had been in existence already for 43 years. The infrastructure gap was an emerging issue at that time. Today, Minneapolis residents and elected officials face new challenges. I'm confident that together we will meet and overcome those challenges. So some of the issues that our CLIC committee raised in the 2020 report, members of the Board of Estimate and Taxation, in reviewing 130 proposals totaling $1.4 billion, during the 3-month virtual session, CLIC recommended funding for all or a portion of 89 proposals totaling $1.0 billion. So the CLIC process was postponed to late summer at the request of Mayor Fry. We were very pleased to work closely with finance and facility services staff on this year's process. And so some of the issues that we raised, rather than looking into the weeds of specific projects, I'll defer to the task force chairs for that, or you can review the report. But for example, we have today John Bernstein, who is basically our resident expert on the challenges that CLIC has in making financial recommendations that are compliant in the context of some inflexibility and prescriptive nature of the adopted neighborhood park and street infrastructure ordinance. Another question that we faced and that we pose and wish to resolve and improve, as have the city leadership, can the city's racial equity impact assessment tool be utilized more specifically on capital improvement projects and capital budgeting decisions? Further, how do we achieve meaningful and upstream public engagement? Can the city receive input from the public directly to department heads to include in their capital budget plans, as some other jurisdictions do, like St. Paul? And how can the city formalize a feedback loop mechanism for CLIC members to have specific information about how elected policymakers plan to address, incorporate CLIC comments on process and policy direction? And I would like to thank Mayor Fry and the mayor's staff who've been very responsive. Mayor Fry has been very responsive in providing a feedback loop to the committee members. So at that point, Madam President, may I ask that perhaps call on John Bernstein, who is the Transportation Task Force Chair of our committee.
Mr. Bernstein.
Hi, this is John Bernstein. As Jeff said, I'm the chair of the Transportation Task Force Committee. This CLIC season that we just closed was my 14th on the committee. I'm not sure exactly what information you're looking for, but just to dovetail off, if you want to share anything about that, I'd be happy to hear. I'll dovetail off of Jeff's comment about the Streets and Parks Infrastructure Ordinance and how that impacts our work. Previously to that ordinance, we simply did a ground-up approach, and using a rating system that's been in place for quite some time and is outlined in the back of the CLIC report that is published each year, the projects that rose to the top were the projects that typically would get funded. When the Street and Parks Ordinance, Infrastructure Ordinance was passed, that forced us to change our methodology a bit, because for that report to be effective, we needed to make sure that we were recommending enough projects that qualified under street improvements and enough projects that qualified under parks improvements, so that the mayor and the city council would be meeting that ordinance each year. So instead of purely looking at each project on its own merits, we had to make sure that we were giving enough funding to street projects and park projects. In the initial years, that was challenging in an understandable way, in that Public Works was having difficulty coming up with enough projects to meet those numbers in the first few years. It continues to be a problem. It's getting better. Challenging again this year just because of the constraints generally on budgets. And unfortunately, we were working with the net debt bond budget that was set back in February by the city council, informally set, as I understand it, which, safe to say, is probably not going to be look much like what actually gets adopted, given everything that's happened since February. So that was a problem for us in terms of our process. There's not much we could do about that. So we chose to not get really specific about hitting the numbers in any given year, since the numbers are probably going to move quite a bit. We did try to get close to funding on both streets and parks. And a broad comment that is in the report that you can read that we've been making for several years is that, while we certainly understand the reason for the ordinance and the cause is a good one, it has presumably unintended consequences, which is it's restrictive on other areas. And so some of the areas that suffer the most are big, expensive projects. As an example, a new fire station, the new utility, I'm not using the correct term here, but the new city building that's planned over in Phillips, that's going to be a shared use building. Those are big projects. They take up a lot of net debt bonds in any given year, and those get challenging to fund, certainly within a single year, let alone even two, when so much of the funds are already chewed up by streets and parks. So obviously there's a lot of ways that can be addressed. Probably the more challenging one would be to change the ordinance, but outside of doing something like that, broadening the definition of what qualifies as a street improvement for that ordinance would be one example of a way that would lend a little more flexibility to the process. From the park side of things, an improvement would be if we got more projects from the park board to look at. They have a tendency to give us enough projects to just barely meet their funding request, which in effect makes us sort of a rubber stamp committee for them. We're not really making any decisions because they're not giving us enough projects to do that. So for our process to be as robust as it can potentially be, we need more projects from them. I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer questions or address anything else that people are interested in.
Does anyone have any questions? I will say, as someone who had a hand in the parks and the streets ordinance, I hadn't really thought about the impact on CLIC in that process. We had just attempted to secure money so we could maintain that. But you're right, I had never thought about the impact on CLIC, and that's a really interesting point. Mr. Kogel.
Thank you, President Becker. Mr. Bernstein, I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit about the impact of not seeing enough projects from the park board to adequately evaluate. I just want a little bit more context so I can understand that when I go back to having other conversations at the board.
Happy to do that. So we have this process that if it's successful, vets these projects and puts them in rank order of which ones warrant funding in front of another versus any other project. When we're getting a number of projects that, so let's just use round numbers. The park board's got about $10 million a year to work with on capital projects. We're getting something on the order of $11 to $12 million worth of proposals. So in effect, there's very few, regardless of how we rank them, there's very few projects that won't get funded based on our recommendations because it's too close to the actual funding number. If we got $18 million worth of proposals, then we could really do a ranking and say, listen, these projects make more sense. These are the ones you ought to prioritize. These projects that are falling to the bottom of the list don't make as much sense. And it just makes our work, I think, more valuable to both the park board and the city. That we had the same issue with Public Works. They were able to respond to us a little bit more quickly with respect to this. And again, our role is advisory, so it's not like anything we do is binding on anybody. And I think all of us that are on that committee, all 33 of us, come at this with a fair amount of integrity and just try to look at things from the ground up. What makes the most sense? Do we have all the information? No, there's other information that park board and city council and the mayor would have that might alter exactly how they use our recommendations. But I think it's a pretty useful process where we don't have a lot of that internal information and we're purely looking at these things on the merits.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Other questions? Other questions?
I had my name up there.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Wheeler. I apologize. There you are. Mr. Wheeler.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm actually here. Well, 65 years CLIC has been around. That's almost as long as it's almost as long as I've been around. Anyway, what I think is particularly valuable about CLIC is that it gives a whole nother level of citizen input from around the city. Some of those people are appointed by the mayor, others come from the various wards. And what happens, I think, so often that there's a professionalization of decision-making by staff. And I think that it's important to have their input, no question about it. And they can rank some priorities and say some things that are important. But I think it's also vitally important that the citizens of Minneapolis a wide variety of people who, as we have heard, come in with integrity to do this work, to help rank and to make choices for us and to make recommendations. I think that is valuable because there's a whole another level of citizen participation in the future of our city. And I just want to affirm that, and I want to say thank you for those who have given so much of your time over these, some of you for quite a few years. So that's all. I have no question. I just want to make that statement that I think it's important.
This is John Bernstein. Could I just dovetail off that comment? Sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think that's a very fair point. I think one of the best pieces of the diversity of our committee, well, there's two pieces to it. One is the geographic diversity. So for those that may not know, each council member gets 2 appointees and the mayor gets 7. So, and typically, almost without exception, the 2 appointees of each council member come from their ward. There is a sort of an unwritten rule that we're not supposed to be too territorial about how we approach this. We're supposed to be looking at this from what's best for the city overall, not just trying to do things that benefit our own ward. But having that, many of the people that are on this committee are connected to neighborhoods within their ward, and so they have information that sometimes isn't getting bubbling up to the city level. That's important. That's helpful to have in the process. The other thing about the diversity of the committee is, I think actually one of the most valuable pieces of diversity is the backgrounds of everybody, not necessarily religion, race, those the typical things you think of, but rather educational and career backgrounds. We have people that are environmental experts, we have people that are IT experts, and oftentimes that expertise proves very useful in our discussions about some of these projects. There's a struggle right now about making this process even more participatory, and there's certainly a lot of good reasons to do that. The one concern I have with that, and I'll just, to Jeff's point, highlight that this is my personal opinion, not the broad opinion of CLIC, is that while it's great to get even more citizen participation, that has to be managed very carefully because, as David pointed out, there are experts at the city, whether they're on the finance side of things or the engineering side of things in public work, that are considering a lot of different factors that a given citizen in a given neighborhood wouldn't necessarily be aware of. And so you just need to make sure that, to the extent you use a ground-up approach, that expectations are managed and people understand that just because they ask for a project doesn't mean it's necessarily going to get funded. And if it doesn't get funded, it's not necessarily that it's a bad project. It's all about balancing out all of these other considerations across the entire city.
May I say something? This is Willie Bridges. I think one of the things about CLIC, I've been involved with CLIC for a number of years. And one of the things that we talk about on CLIC, the projects that needs to be done, but also the diversity of our group to represent the community. I feel that that's an important part of CLIC, that we have members of the community. As you said earlier, President, that's an important piece. We have discussions, intense discussion. And one thing on CLIC, I can assure you, we all don't agree, but when we leave there, it's a consensus of everyone. And that's what makes the process for us an honest process, because people have a different perspective where they're coming from. So CLIC has been, we've been doing this for a long time. We're learning, and it's working with new staff this year. We're all learning the new staff. But it's like the people that are involved with CLIC, they do have the best interests of the city. And we look at all the communities. What is our role? Working with the staff, suggesting things that how do we improve our communities? Thank you.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Ms. Bender.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thanks to the members of CLIC who came. I know I have been able to go a couple of times along with Mayor Fry, and usually was Councilmember Warsame who used to chair our Ways and Means Committee. But it's nice to hear from you in this venue. I wanted to reflect that in my time in office, the city has really moved toward having more systems plans for infrastructure. Our transportation action plan just came to the Public Works Committee today, which has a systems plan for every aspect of our transportation system: freight, auto travel, bus and transit, walking and biking, and as well as a number of action steps that aren't the kinds of infrastructure projects that show up as a line item in our capital improvement program, but that will someday if they are to be implemented, along with our Vision Zero plan, specifically focused on reducing crashes and enhancing safety in our street system, the stormwater management plan that Public Works has been working on for a number of years, which built on work related to mapping flooding, both now and under different climate change scenarios that are likely to face the city, as flooding is our biggest climate change related risk in Minneapolis. So I think it's interesting to think about the role of CLIC as in asking some of these policy questions, like the one you raised about how we're using our race equity analysis related to project selection, especially in light of our movement toward more system level planning and thinking about how CLIC might help identify priorities within those systems plans, and maybe some more of that policy level guidance. Interested in any feedback about that now or in future conversations. So thanks again.
Would somebody from CLIC like to speak to that?
President, I believe our member Katie Jones is here. For example, related to comments on carbon consideration and climate change and parking, et cetera.
Would you, Mr. Strand, would you prefer to respond to Ms. Bender or would you prefer to have Ms. Jones speak next?
I would prefer to ask Ms. Jones to speak to those comments.
Ms. Jones, are you available?
Hello. Madam President, Madam President,
yes, ma'am.
Ms. Jones is not on this call. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well,
Mr. Strand, would you like to?
yes, I appreciate Council President Bender's comments, and I think CLIC is very interested in addressing systemic concerns, and I think those are at least partly addressed in the comments in the report for 2020, and so CLIC put in comments related to the issue of climate change and parking, the whole community planning around policing, changing policing, since there are infrastructure requests related to MPD facilities. Absolutely. I mean, that's been trying to ensure that the capital infrastructure is appropriately reinvested. And so I think you'll see recommendations in the report, for example, a smaller project, but the bridge maintenance, you know, it's something that people can easily overlook, but our comment was that we believe that program is sufficiently funded, but it needs to stay sufficiently funded to avoid potential disasters as we did experience.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I just maybe want to just respond to say that I think that those policy suggestions over the years have been really helpful and are impactful in shaping our city's infrastructure system. So I know that a lot of the work is focused on project selection and ranking, but I also think that the work that CLIC has done over the years at this more policy level has been really helpful, and that seems like an important direction as we go in the future in implementing some of these bigger infrastructure plans. And Ms. Jones is a Ward 10 appointee, as you know, so I've had some conversations with her over the years about some of this, but happy to follow up with her more directly as well. Thank you, Mr. Strand.
Thank you, Ms. Bender. Mr. Wan, are you on the line and would you like to address some of the elements on the CLIC report?
Madam President, the tech team reports that Mr. Wan is not currently on the call either.
Okay. Thank you so much. Mr. Strand, do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to make then?
Thanks, Madam President. I would be remiss in not thanking our CLIC staff for this past session. And so Micah Intermill and Robert Harrison particularly, I didn't realize I'd have this opportunity to publicly thank them, but they certainly took up the role of supporting the volunteer CLIC members when Mr. Ablin, the debt guy, was moved to other responsibilities. And so as a longtime member, I really appreciate the professionalism that we experienced. So again, I would just recommend that if BET members have not already done so, like the council members and mayor, at your convenience, take a look at the CLIC report online. And we're all in the process of reviewing our guidelines and some of our process before our terms end at the end of 2020. And so I want to thank all of my CLIC colleagues for their diligence and perseverance. This year was such a challenging session. And I want to thank the members for the opportunity to have this conversation with you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Strand. I deeply, deeply appreciate the work that you do. And I think that you bring an important perspective, as Mr. Wheeler noted, of bringing the perspective of the citizenry and diversity in all sorts of different ways to our planning processes. And I really feel that your voice is very, very important. And I want to thank you for coming today. And I hope that we can continue in our dialogue together so we can be informed from the work that you do and the deep and thoughtful analysis that you bring to this process. So thank you very much for your work and what you bring to our city. All right. Any other folks want to have any discussion on this? If not, then I think we're done with this. Thank you, Mr. Strand. Thank you for the members from the board. Appreciate you coming. All right. Without objection, the report or discussion will be received and filed. And we'll move on to item 5 on the agenda, the draft 2021 calendar of the Board of Estimate. Do I have any discussion on the calendar for next year? This is just a draft calendar. Obviously, we cannot set the final calendar until we meet next year. But to hold spots in the building and things like that, we need to have a draft calendar. So do I have any, can I have a motion to adopt the draft calendar?
A motion to adopt the draft calendar.
Madam President, this is Jackie from the clerk's office. At this point, this is a draft calendar that you're considering. The bylaws indicate that the board will adopt the calendar in January, the first meeting in January. So I don't believe that a motion to adopt this calendar is needed, since the board will be considering that at its January annual meeting.
Motion withdrawn.
There you go. All right, then we don't need actually a motion. So we'll then, if anyone has any objections, let us know, but that's the draft calendar and we'll adopt it next year. Sorry. Let me see here. I'm going through my calendar is adopted. Item 6 on the agenda is a presentation on the capital project closeouts. At this point, it looks like with the scheduling with the committees that we will have a proposal from the City Council on December 9th to approve some changes to the capital program. And December 9th is the same night that we have to adopt the budget. And it's usually quite a chaotic night, although maybe it'll be a little bit different online. And so I was hoping we could have a quick discussion here so we can just move that as a consent item on December 9th. And so I believe Brett Helly's here today from Public Works to present the report.
Good afternoon, President Becker and members of the board. My name is Brett Jelly, and I'm the Deputy Director of Business Administration in the Public Works Department. Yes, thank you, President Becker and members of the board for flexibility. This did go through Transportation and Public Works Committee today and was approved on the consent agenda, so will be approved by the City Council at their next meeting. The item before you is our annual financial close of capital projects. This is something we do each year. It's really a year-long process that couldn't happen without a lot of work from capital project teams and the finance team. And I would like to kind of specifically thank Vicki Stone from Public Works, Mike Ablin in Finance and Property Services, and many others for their work on this item. So really, just to give a high-level summary, this action is reflected in 3 schedules. So the first schedule is the one that is on the screen right now. It lists all of the relevant projects with their final appropriations. This schedule represents approximately $270 million in closing capital projects. There are capital projects out of the 4100 fund and also within the enterprise funds. And most of the projects will be closing as part of this action. There are a small handful of projects that will be receiving either revenue or bonds and remaining open and being closed at a future date. The second schedule reflects the non-bond revenue that's being adjusted. This adjusts $3.9 million of revenue between the projects. And again, that's the slide that's in front of you. The $3.9 million is, majority of it is going to projects that are closing. Some available revenue is going to projects that will remain open and be closed at a future date. And then the final schedule, and I do believe kind of most relevant for the Board of Estimate and Taxation, is the list of bond adjustments. So this reallocates $1.6 million worth of bonds between projects. Roughly 1.2 million of that is being moved around within projects that are closing, with about 400,000 going to a project that will again stay open and be closed at a future date. So overall, we're closing 44 total projects, and pretty standard closeout letter this year. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions on this item? I just have one question on the Target Center. I'm looking at really tiny print on the screen here. Did the Target Center come below cost or above cost? The $12 million there.
President Becker, thank you for that question. I am going to give somebody from finance the opportunity to click in here. There are 2 projects in the closeout that are not Public Works related. As I said, we work very closely with Finance and Property Services. So if somebody from the finance team could jump in on that one, I would appreciate it.
President Becker, this is Michael Ablin from the Finance Department, and I was involved with the Target Center renovation project. And that particular project started out initially with a $150 million appropriation. It was reduced to, I believe, $140 million fairly early in the project, but this appropriation was left out there. Just business bookkeeping wise, it was probably left at 150. So what's going on in this action is just quantifying that the project came in at 137 million and change, and that we're closing out that excess appropriation. And there was a little bit of excess revenue also that's being used to solve some of the financial needs of the other projects that are on the various schedules. So.
Okay. All right, thank you. I don't have any other questions. Does anyone have any other questions on this? All right, Hearing none, like I said, this will be a consent item on the December 9th agenda after it's gone through the city council decision processes. So, all right. With that, and again, we don't need an action at this point on that. So does anyone have any other agenda items for the next meeting? All right. Going once, going twice. With that, we've concluded all the business that's before us. Without objection, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much, folks. Thanks to everybody who makes this happen. We appreciate it.